Welcome everyone to our webinar about discovering Hamlet. So I was just introducing our panelists tonight. Jourdan Oliver-Verde created the Discovering Hamlet project with me. We kind of co-created it. And the idea behind it was to create some instructional materials that high school and middle school English teachers who are teaching Shakespeare would want to use. And what we wanted to do was to create materials that examine Shakespeare through an anti-racist lens. So Jourdan was the project manager, and one of the teaching artists, Makha Mthembu, was another one of the teaching artists who was involved, and we'll talk more about her wonderful Sip and Tell Hamlet series in a little bit. And Amy Marie Haven was one of the directors we brought in to work with some of the actors. Marcia Simmons is our marketing director who's done all the behind the scenes work on this project. So we're going to start tonight by sharing a short video that Marcia's created that gives you a taste of the work. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jourdan to have a robust conversation with our panelists. So thank you all for being here. And Marcia, thanks for sharing the video.
Hello, everyone. This is Jourdan Oliver-Verde, and this is Marin Shakespeare Company's Discovering Hamlet project. What we did is we took a couple of scenes from Hamlet, and we decided to look at them from diverse perspectives. Our hope is that teachers will find these tools to be beneficial as they dissect the themes of Hamlet. Thank you.
What meaning does the actor's incarceration bring to the story and themes of this production?
Does watching this performance change any ideas you might have had about our prison system and the people it incarcerates?
Hello, Bernardo.
What, is Horatio here?
He's him.
Welcome, Horatio. Welcome to Marcel.
What? Has this thing appeared again tonight?
I have seen nothing.
My father. He thinks I see my father. Where, my lord?
In my mind's eye, Horatio.
I saw him once.
He's a goodly kid.
He was a man, taken for all in all. I shall not look upon his like again. My lord, I think I saw him yesternight.
Saw?
Who?
The king, your father.
King, my father.
2 nights had these gentlemen on their watch. In the dark, vast, in the middle of the night, then does encounter. A figure like your father appears before them. Thrice he walked while stayed still with fear, stand dumb and speak not to him. I with them the 3rd night kept the watch. Each word made true and good the apparition comes. I knew your father. His hands are not more light.
Neither a borrower nor a lender be. For loan off loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it shall follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to anything. Farewell. My blessing sees you, dear Sydney.
Unhand me, gentlemen. By heaven, I'll make a ghost of him that holds me. Say away. Go on. I'll follow thee.
Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Sleeping in my orchard, my custom always in the afternoon, up on my secure hour, thy uncle stole with the juice of cursed Lebanon in the bow. And if you bunches of my ears did pour the leprous poison, thus was I, sleeping. My brother's hand of life, of crown of queen, at once dispatched, cut off even in the blossom of my sin. No reckoning made, but sent to my account. With all the imperfections on my head, most horrible.
I shall heal these broken wings and fly.
To be, or not to be? That is the question. but that 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer. Slings and arrows of outrageous torture. Take arms against a sea of troubles. By opposing end them, to die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep to save the end, the heart, the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to.
I love you, baby.
Are you all right?
Give over the plate.
My words fly up. My thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go.
What will I do? They will not murder me! Help! Help!
Help! Help! Help!
Now, we're rats! Death for a duckling! Death!
Alas, he's mad.
Did not you come your tardy son to chide?
Do not forget. This visitation is but to whet thy almost blunted purpose.
Why, look you there, look! Don't steal away! This is I, Hamlet the Dane! The devil take thy soul! Pull off my head!
Your lordship is right welcome back to Denmark.
Come on, sir.
Come, my lord.
One! No! And, in this harsh world, draw thy breath in pain to tell my story. The rest is silence. Now cracks a noble heart. Nice, sweet prince. Flights of angels, sing thee to thy rest!
So there he is, and all sad, and his BFF forever, Horatio, shows up and is like, Hamlet! I saw your dead father. And Hamlet's like, what? Horatia's like, mm-hmm. And Hamlet's all, let me check it out myself and I'll let you know if it is my father. Later on that evening, Hamlet goes, he waits for the father to show up, the ghost. Okay. And he does look 100% like his father. And the ghost says, Hamlet, come over here, I need to tell you some stuff, but in private. And Hamlet goes off, and the father goes, Hamlet. Mm-hmm. So everyone here thinks that I died because a snake bit me. I was like, yeah, we know. Lies, Hamlet, that's a lie! And Hamlet does his to be or not to be speech.
Tinu Hamlet, what is he saying? To be what? Exactly, what are we being here?
It's not to be or not to be. To act or not to act. Do I take action or do I not take action? Do I do this thing, kill my uncle? Or should I just be tortured in my own head forever? Trying to figure out what he should do next. We've got this story now where there are two sons who feel like they both need to avenge their fathers. Queen Gertrude comes in and goes, hey, so I've got some good news, I've got some bad news. Good news, Ophelia is not crazy anymore. Bad news, she's dead. Tried to be honorable, but instead everyone's dead. Please, tell my tale, tell my story, tell of Hamlet. And he dies. And that's Hamlet in a nutshell.
I can relate to a lot of that.
Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and dissolve itself into a dew. But that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Oh, God. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Fie on it, ah, fie. 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed things rank and gross in nature. Possess it merely, that it should come to this. I grew up legally blind, and I'm still legally blind. I've kind of always been on this kind of outsider perspective, just because I do see the world fundamentally differently. But I think what Hamlet deals with, certainly when I played him, what I felt like I was dealing with was talking about, is it worth it to be alive? Grief nearly cripples this guy. He can barely function with it. And that's true of everybody. After you experience a great loss, it is hard. It robs your life of meaning. It makes it hard to answer that question, to be or not to be. I think when you're in the throes of great grief, it's hard to get the answer to that question. And that's what this play wrestles with.
Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censor, but reserve thy judgment. You will find that many people will have opinions, and they will have judgments, and they will be more than happy to unleash those upon people in front of the world. But Polonius is advising Laertes to hear people's complaints about you, but hold your judgments about them. To thine own self be true. If you know what you feel in your heart to be right, if you know this, if you can measure this against right character outside that's lining up with your moral compass inside, you know this is real. If you honor that, it will be hard for you to be dishonorable for anyone else.
We're going to look at a more contemporary version of this scene written by Meme Garcia, and the play is called House of Sueños.
Do you know what it's like to die before you're dead? And instead of staying by my side to fight for me, to fight with me, mi esposa, tu mamá, ¿sabes lo que hizo ella? She murdered me. She turned me into a monster of her wildest dreams. I'd finally become what this country told me I was meant to be, the ultimate American dream, a Latino finally catching the light with his bare hands, only to have it ripped away in his moment of darkness. So prove to me that you still carry la cara de tu papi en tu corazón, that you will clear my name, that you will avenge my death.
Feeling Hamlet is just so emotionally overwhelmed and ready to be given knowledge, but he just kind of can't stop himself from running off at the mouth. And what's really cool is that Meme then takes that and they do something really cool with that, where they translate that into Spanish, and it raises the stakes even more. There's a reason why they have to say these things. Their emotion is so heightened that they actually switched language.
Dean is going to read Ophelia, so he's crossing gender. And Leontine is going to read Polonius, so she's crossing gender.
How now, Ophelia? What's the matter?
Oh, my lord, I have been so affrighted.
With what, in the name of God?
So we're going to flip it, and Dean's going to read Polonius, and Leontine is going to read Ophelia.
He seemed to find his way without his eyes, and out of doors he went, without their helps, and to the last bended their light on me.
Come, go with me. I will go seek the king. This is the very ecstasy of love.
Hamlet has 1,500 lines. And Ophelia and Gertrude combined have 350 lines. So it isn't written as fully. Possibly they didn't know the female experience as fully. Possibly they didn't think the female experience was that important. That's what's so interesting about changing the genders in performance, I think, is that you get to have a completely different take on power and even your reason for being. Generally, the men in Shakespeare are fighting for honor, and the women are trying to figure out how to be more nurturing or spiritual or virtuous.
Will you walk out of the air, my lord?
Into my grave.
Indeed, that is out of the air. How pregnant sometimes his replies, and a happiness that often madness hits on.
These tedious old fools.
My first experience with Hamlet was senior year, high school. I'm the only Black girl in class in school. It really was for me about unlocking the treasures in the text and being able to come back again and again, or dig and find something that I was saw it before, but I didn't see before. So that I think is my first encounter and made my obsession with Shakespeare very strong. And I think that also just aligns with part of my Black identity and experiences, like digging out the treasures.
And I remember that I went from no Hamlets to having seen 3 Hamlets in one summer. And one Hamlet was a woman, one Hamlet was a man, and the 3rd Hamlet was a brother, a Black man. And I just remember being like, oh, so Hamlet is everyone's story? It's not just this like one person's type of story? What a piece of work is a man. How noble in reason, how infinite in faculty. And yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man delights not me, no, nor woman neither.
You know, Dr. James Allen Jones says that Black men and women are so many Hamlets. And one of the reasons that he says this is Hamlet, he says but Hamlet is challenged by so much that he contemplates what reality means to him.
Shakespeare actually can evolve and change, even though the words are almost written in stone. Yes, maybe the intention was, and the traditionalists and the conservatives may want to keep it in one form, but the stories just lend themselves to being accessible to anyone, anywhere, anytime.
So I was going to suggest, Leontine, that you begin as Hamlet, and then Dean, I'll ask you to jump in as Ophelia.
If thou dost marry, I'll give thee this plague for thy dowry. Be thou as chaste as ice, as pure as snow, thou shalt not escape calumny. Get thee to a nunnery, farewell. Or if thou wilt needs be married, marry a fool. For wise men know well enough what monsters you make of them.
Well, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown. The courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword, the expectancy and rose of the fair state, the glass of fashion and the mold of form, the observed of all observers, quite down. The misogyny in this scene is so rampant that I have trouble owning it. By doing the scene, sort of regardless of a gender flip, right? By having one person malign a person with this kind of severity, what are we doing, right? Like what is our responsibility as artists?
I think that flipping the casting, but not the roles of the gender, it stays the same. I mean, that's still, the patriarch, like that dynamic, male to female dynamic remains the same.
I know that when I play Hamlet and I stand on stage and I say, "Frailty, thy name is woman," that it's subversive in a way, because it's a woman saying it.
Cedric will be reading Hamlet our first time through in Spanish.
Dirás este pasaje en la forma que te he declamado yo, con soltura de lengua, no con voz desentonada, como lo hacen muchos de nuestros cómicos. Más valdría entonces ver mis versos al pregonero para que los dijese. Ni manotees así, acuchillando el aire. Modernación es todo. Puesto que aún en el torrente la tempestad y, por mejor decir, el huracán de las pasiones, se debe conservar aquella templeza que hace suave y elegante la expresión. Growing up, I don't remember a whole lot of representation of like Latinx folks in these works, but that doesn't mean that we don't belong in them necessarily. We can do it and we are capable, and once you like lean into it, you basically see that there's a lot of beautiful imagery in the language, a lot of beautiful cadences, and it's very flowery, kind of similar to like how Spanish is. When sometimes you hear a fluent Spanish conversation, it's like, I say it's like speaking in cursive.
Oh, my offence is rank, it smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon it, a brother's murder. Pray can I not, though inclination be as sharp as will, my stronger guilt defeats my strong intent.
O limed soul that struggling to be free art more engaged.
Angels. Hey, bow stubborn knees, and heart with strings of steel be as soft as sinews of the newborn babe. All may be well.
Before we start, I want to talk about some of the vocabulary words. Limed.
Trapped.
Yes.
A pickle, sort of.
Yeah. Were there any racist or sexist or other problematic biases in this language that you guys found?
I'd say racist in the way, especially in 2021, I guess, where they're just kind of making white seem clean and black seem toxic. That's just prevalent throughout our history in the past, and it's prevalent in this speech.
But my revenge will come.
Break not your sleeps for that. You must not think that we are made of stuff so flat and dull that we can let our beard be shook with danger and think it pastime. You shortly shall hear more. I loved your father, and we love ourselves. And that, I hope, will teach you to imagine. How now? What news?
I love that Shakespeare uses poison in the ear. Because what is he doing in this scene?
Right.
Yeah.
Poison.
Right. He wasn't the king to begin with for a reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was a reason that the oldest son was that king, and Claudius very much took that beta role, and he took a very cowardly way out of killing his brother. He didn't kill his brother with might. He killed his brother with poison in an ear, and a sleeping ear. You know what I mean? Like, not even, he couldn't even face his brother. He's repulsive in that way, you know, because the coward wins in a way. And that's what you don't want. And watching him rule is toxic to just, you know, the eyes.
Yeah, this notion that we have to like sanitize ourselves or only present this expected version of ourselves, it's not sustainable, and it's not going to lend itself to sincere art.
One of the things that's been kind of fun about how art has been changed in the last year is that there's more of people bringing their full selves, their full experiences and backgrounds and references to the work that they do.
Sometimes we like to eliminate ourselves from the competition before somebody even gets the chance to eliminate us. You know what I mean? Like, where you're like, I don't belong there. We don't do that. But we could, and we do.
That was a taste of these materials, and thank you for watching that. Marcia, thanks for putting that together. I'm going to turn this conversation over to Jourdan now to ask our artists about their experience creating this work.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Lesley, for allowing this opportunity. Thank you, Maria Shakespeare, and also thank you to all of the panelists who, as you all have seen, created some just beautiful work. Just bravo, kudos to all of you all. I'm going to start with Makha, okay? And I'm going to ask about Makha. I want to ask you about Sip and Tell. Well, first of all, I want to let you know I got a message from a participant who had seen you in the Old Globe's Scottish play, and they were blown away by you. So, you know, kudos to you for that as well. But I want to talk to you specifically about Sip and Tell, because from what I know, I don't want to give you, I'm going to let you give your introduction, but I know that during the pandemic, you really wanted to do the work. You know, you were getting that itch that we all get, and you said, "Look, I want to create. Opportunities aren't coming up for me as much as I would like them to because the world is shut down. So let me find out ways that I can create work myself." So tell us a little bit about Sip and Tell Shakespeare. So what is it, and where did the idea come from?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jourdan. It came from, like, it's twofold. Like, partly is being an actor, being a classically trained, I sometimes call myself a classically trained Blackter, like for very many years, but then also having that all go away during quarantine, and just, it's supposed to be okay that it's all gone. And it was obviously, there was a very, very good reason, no better reason in the whole wide world, but it was still sad. And I just remember I got to go like a teeny tiny vacation to Big Bear with a friend of mine. And we were just sitting on their stoop. And I was just retelling them the time I got to perform Shakespeare for many underserved communities in San Diego with the Old Globe, including a prison. And I was just telling them about Measure for Measure, a play they didn't know, and just retelling it to them in a way that I thought would be interesting. Either way I view it. And they were like, what? No, huh? And like literally in that moment, essentially Sip and Tell was born, where it was them going, but is this interesting? And me going, how do you not know? It's so interesting. And them continuing to ask questions. And in the asking of the questions, me being like, I haven't thought of that. Like, that's really interesting. Like, maybe it's this. Because when you do Shakespeare, it tends to sometimes get very intellectual. When you're just having a conversation with someone, you just ask a really kind of deep question of like, but how did that make you feel? Like, whoa, no one asks that. And so after that little vacation, it just kind of just sat with me that one of the most enjoyable things I did all quarantine long was sit and tell a story. Like, that is what we do at the end of the day. Like, we're storytellers. And I just thought to myself, well, I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm just going to do the same thing. And I set up a camera and I sat and I told my Shakespeare story, and I moved the camera around, and then I was a different person asking questions, i.e. by kind of inspired by my friend. But as I was kind of rewatching it, I realized like, oh, I forgot like being what I am and who I am my whole life, and telling these stories and having other participants who most of the time don't look like me, and then every now and again do look like me. There's nothing about a Shakespeare experience that's ordinary. And I realized, I was like, oh, I think I need to tell more. I need to just keep telling stories like this and keep telling this story specifically. And I happened to be lucky enough to find Lesley and Marin Shakes, where they were enthusiastic about me wanting to tell the Shakespeare in this way, because essentially it's kind of stupid, where like the highlights of Shakespeare is the dumbest concept in the world. And that's kind of the fun to me of like, but if the highlights are interesting, like if you go deeper, there's no way it's not interesting. And that's where it came from for me.
That's awesome. That's amazing. It's amazing how inspiration can just come out of nowhere and you can create an entire project. And me being a red wine enthusiast, I have to tell you that I really love the sip aspect of that as well, because as you know, that is a great way to get some conversations going as well, really deep conversation through the nectar of the gods, as you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was your beginning. So how do you see Sip and Tell developing? Into what platforms do you see it ultimately ending up in?
The main thing for me about it is I really wanted to do kind of the not straightforward plays, the plays that don't necessarily illuminate themselves the first time you see it, the play that sometimes people feel excluded from. And so I'd like to continue kind of doing that and continuing to do the odd Shakespeare, because sometimes the odd Shakespeare is the one where most people might actually see themselves. And I would love to have a podcast adjoining to each episode as well, because I think it's just so me and it's just so kind of concentrated of just me, but I'd love to bring other people in as well to go, hey, you've also done this play. What was your experience? What was your feeling? And hear how they tell the story of it. And eventually, it's kind of a fun thing that Shakespeare has so many plays, because maybe after I get done with the weird ones, I go, well, let's go back and do the not weird ones and see what weird things I can find about it and what highlights I might want to spill some tea about. And so the hope is eventually to also have a podcast, but I could essentially keep doing this for the rest of my life at this point. Like, there's so many plays.
Yeah, very true. Very, very true. And to that point, we have a lot of people that's watching this, and we have a lot of people that are will be watching it. And I'm pretty sure everybody can see how amazing of an opportunity this is, you know, to actually come alongside if they wanted to. So in what ways do you see that people who want to help, how can they contribute to helping you create a larger platform for this wonderful idea?
I mean, the first thing is just so obvious, like watch it and see how you feel about it. And if you like it, then share it with someone else. Like, to me, it's as simple as that. It's oral storytelling. You hear a story, you tell it to someone else, you tell your friend, then you have 5 friends around you. And before you know it, it's a community thing. And so I think for me, it's just a case of the more community I have with Sip and Tell, the better. Because if I have, even if the small community I have with it now is just so lovely and just beautiful, I'm like, yeah, please come on board. And it's available on YouTube. And I believe that Lesley also, through Marin, also has ways for people to also watch Sip and Tell. But it's just watch it and see how you feel. That's all I want. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think it's interesting how you mentioned about, you know, oral storytelling, which, you know, it has that has its roots not only in the beginning of theater as a convention, but also it has roots within, you know, specifically within the African diaspora and the griots, and that's kind of how history was passed along. So it's beautiful to see how that's being translated even today in the 21st century. And so what impact do you see, do you think that this will have to the audience members, especially the younger people who are watching this and not really familiar with Shakespeare?
My hope with this is to just really awaken an enjoyment of Shakespeare in a way I enjoy it. Honestly, to awaken a reaction, even if I awaken more disgust with Shakespeare or someone going, I actually don't like this. If they're able to articulate why they don't like this, I'm like, actually, Shakespeare did his job. That's half of what he wanted you to do, is to just feel a thing and express it. And so my hope is the obvious one of, I'd love people to love Shakespeare, but even if they're just articulating what about it doesn't necessarily resonate with them and what they think it should be doing, like, that's amazing as well. Even a blank space is a thing that a person can fill, and the original author who left you that blank space still did a job. So I would hope, obviously, that also seeing me, like I said, classically trained Blackter doing Shakespeare, it's also not that higher grade of a thing, I think. And I think that's another thing that people tend to think, that it's only for certain people or like a certain education of people. I'm like, no, it's for everyone, it's for you. And that also means if it's not for you, that's articulate why and go make something that's for you that you think is even better. And yeah, I just want people to feel about Shakespeare. That's my hope.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for that, Makha. Again, you have an amazing project on your hands, and we would love to support it in the way we can. There has been some information that's been linked in the chat. So all of the participants, if you are interested in learning more about Makha's project, please check out those links. You will be blown away. Thanks again, Makha.
Thank you so
much.
All right.
Thank you. So now I'm going to talk to you all about the, just briefly about the Discovering Hamlet project, the inception of it. So basically, as we know, 2020 was a very consequential year to me. I liken it, although I was not born during this time, but I liken it to 1968 in as far as how significant it was, as far as, you know, the losses that we were experiencing nationally, and just the ramification of all of the different things that were happening at the same time. And so during this time, of course, the watershed moment for a lot of people was when we were all in our homes and we all were glued to the screen and watched George Floyd's murder. And it caused people to really think about a lot of things and to confront things that they normally would not have. And so the nation changed as a whole within its infrastructure. And a lot of times theater is reflective of the times. And so one thing that happened was that the public theater in New York, they did this very powerful piece called "To Be Black." It was based a reading of "To Be or Not to Be," and a lot of the theater companies around, particularly in the Bay Area, specifically, were being brought to task about a lot of things, and so they started to really look at things as well, and. So I serve on the board of directors for Marin Shakespeare Company, and I also was heading an initiative. I was a chair for the BIPOC Alliance Council, and we were having many conversations. Lesley and the board at Marin Shakespeare and Bob Currier wanted to really look at ways to really come alongside and really share the message of anti-racist theater. So Lesley and I were talking, and she said, so I think it would be nice to see Hamlet and try to look at it from an anti-racist lens. And I told her, oh, that sounds awesome. And so we were talking, and I was thinking to myself, we know that Shakespeare is seen today as problematic for plenty of reasons. He was a white man in a white country, and his stories mainly dealt with white lives. And so trying to translate that now, it's not as easy. So I thought, okay, what could we do to knock this right on its side, like in every way possible? So we just came up with different scenarios. So I came up to Lesley and said, what if we do one from the African diaspora point of view? Let's do one, that women presenting actors at the time were not allowed to perform Shakespeare. So why don't we do some gender bent ones where we allow women presenting actors to play the male presenting roles, and then to switch it out to see how does that read. Let's do let's do one with Latinx performers and doing one bilingual. A lot of times, American students, they're used to seeing everything in English, and then it's the bilingual students who have to catch up. So how about switching that around to where we can have it where the American students, the English speaking students, English as the first language, how can we have them to actually, be the ones who actually have to learn how to translate things and learning new languages. And so these were just a couple of the ideas, and then a multicultural one as well. So these were a couple of the ideas that we put up. We went about, we hired some of the best directors we could find. We assembled some of the best actors we could find. And this is the magic that was created. So I want to talk to each of you all, because each of you all were actually a part of the panel. Amy Marie Haven, as you know, you directed You directed the one from the African diaspora, which Makha was actually a part of. And Marsha has actually been behind the scenes, just helping with everything. She's been a superstar. So I definitely want to make sure that I would be remiss if I didn't make sure we gave kudos to Marsha for all of her hard work. As you can see, all of the editing, all of that was hours and hours of work. So thank you so much for that, Marsha. So my question to the panelists, my first question is, what did you particularly learn working on this project? I'll ask that. I'll ask Amy that first, please.
Thank you, Jourdan and Lesley and Makha. What a pleasure to be here, attendees, folks watching. I've learned so much. I have to say first, as a director, being approached for this project was a dream. And I shared it with my fellow actors and said, hey friends, we're all at home reading, working, researching, mending our laces, getting ready for what is to come. And we get to do book work. We get to, as artists, we get to sit around and dig deep and take the time to go as deep as work should always go, but isn't always made time to go as deep. So I guess I won't say that's what I learned as much as what I was the most grateful for was when Lesley and Jourdan approached me and said, hey, find some of your favorite actors to work with and take a small piece and let's go deep on it. Let's go deep and really look at it through this lens and through the lens of African diaspora, Black, BIPOC folks. I sometimes say that doing art while Black is a radically political act. And so I feel like I learned, what did I learn? I feel like more than learned, I really have to say I felt so deeply. I was in a Zoom rehearsal and I was in tears with my actors because of how good they were and how many different aspects I saw of the text. I learned from my actors. I learned about moments I hadn't literally read. I'm like, where is that, Brie? I don't hear what's going on in the story there. I learned how many different ways a moment could play and how many different meanings it could have depending on different performers speaking the lines. And our piece was really powerful. Makha, I worked with Makha, Brie Ely, Funmi, and Ron Chapman. So I was also so fortunate to have Lesley and Jourdan say, oh, you're doing a 2-person scene. Why don't you ask 4 people to read the scene so we can really hear the differences? And then each actor also worked on a Hamlet speech, what a piece of work is man as well. And so I guess I will say the biggest thing I learned is, I'll say this, the biggest thing I learned is the joy in collaborative work, especially as I'm looking at Shakespeare right now through the lens of grappling with complex texts. And that is something that we all will serve all of us as individuals, as artists, in whatever career, whatever work we want to do in the world, grappling with complex texts. And again, going deep on something small, I think is the greatest thing we can take from the Bard's work. And so being able to do that and to really grapple, I think was the most powerful part of the experience for me, for sure.
Okay, thank you. And so Makha, I want to ask you, the videos asked, do you think that Shakespeare is relevant today? And if so, why? What is your answer to that particular question?
I think that's such a great question. And I think it's a question we, as artists, must always keep asking ourselves about the art that we are making and the material that we're using. And for me, I feel as though if Shakespeare stays in the hands of just Europe and European artists, it could lose relevancy, because even though that's where it came from, ironically, that's not just what Shakespeare was influenced by, and that's not just what he himself was writing about. And I always think of it as a prism where, so the words are what they are, but it's the actors that make them come to life and give it the experience. I think about the first time I saw the first folio, because you're like, oh my goodness, it's the first folio. This is everything. This is where Shakespeare comes from. And you see it and it looks cool, but you're like, oh, it's a book with words in it. But when I'm in the room with someone and someone says a speech in a way where I've never heard it before, and it's made me feel a feeling I don't know how to describe yet, I'm like, oh, that's where it's alive. It's not in that book. And I think that it will continue to have relevancy if different types of people with different experiences and really different hearts even, if they get to be the prisms through which Shakespeare continues to be experienced, it could almost never lose relevancy. But if we try to put it in a museum, it's gonna die. It'll die next week.
That's a good point.
Jourdan, can I add to that? I feel like, you know, if we want to cancel all things old and white and throw out all work that has, I mean, it's an erasure. You know, I think that something that's so powerful about the world right now, I know I'm learning personally the power of difficult conversations. And so it's not about throwing something out because when it was written or some of the things in it are offensive or meant this then, what do they mean now? And how do we grapple with that now? That's a reason I'm just so impressed with Sip and Tell, Makha. I think it's very important, the highlights of Shakespeare, because for me, it's all about accessibility. It's all about inviting folks in. That's why accessibility and inclusion is so important. And so I just think that Shakespeare is alive today. I love what Makha says about a prism. It's alive today by what we bring to it, and more alive by, like we said, these words that are essentially written in stone. But when you can unlock the treasures, when you can look through a different facet and see something that you haven't seen before, or how things change meaning over time, how we want them to change meaning over time. I think that Shakespeare can only get more relevant as we dig with our modern tools at it.
Thank you. And to that point, I have a two-part question. It's going to be for both of you all. And then I'm going to open up for Q&A for our panel, for our participants. But the two-part questions are, do you think, if that's the case, what you were just saying about erasure and to that point, do you think then it's possible to teach and or perform Shakespeare in a way that is anti-racist? And if so, what does that mean? And how does that look for you? And the second part would be, what do you see as the future of Shakespeare education and production in America? So that is raised to both panelists.
Amy Marie, go.
Okay, I'm gonna go first. I wanna talk about In the Heights for a second, because I'm talking to everybody about In the Heights right now, and Hamilton too, and whitewashing history and erasure. And there's a lot to be said, but something I'm saying again and again, and I'm coming to is, Lynn's doing the work. You know, he's not going to get everything perfect, but they're doing the work. Are there still issues? Yes, of course. But to do work on that front line is to not do it all perfectly the first time, the right time. So I think I don't want to say again, but again. A part of my process with my actors, we spend a lot of time checking in about ourselves and our identities as Black artists. And I do think doing work as a Black artist is, I don't want to say it's enough to do work with people of color in the room, but I think that shows that are very diverse and some are flying and some have moments and some are splatting and some have beauty and rough moments. Again, I'll say what I said about difficult conversations. I think it's important. I want to be with the risk takers and the people who are trying and the people who are pushing. And there's nothing like Shakespeare. I have a very exciting, I don't know, I feel like it's exciting. I have an exciting concept for Tempest, where I would love to see a Tempest on a desert island where a lot of Ariel is an ancestor, is someone from the slave ship, someone who's essentially walked from the bottom of the ocean. And this is and where Prospero, right, is a person of color who in his has magic that is sort of with him on this island. But yeah, essentially a tempest where we speak from the ancestors who we lost from a slave ship. And so I think that we can do work that is that, I don't want to say explicitly, but like on the nosedly anti-racist and exploring. And even as I grappled with it, I'm like, well, what does it mean? And with this actor, and if we change the gender of this, we change the identity, the ethnic identity of this character, how would that inform this? And as I thought through it, I'm like, I might fail, I might offend someone, I might do it wrong. But I think trying to do it and doing it is, again, that's where we have to be. And so I think, getting ideas and going deep, which again is what Discovering Hamlet allowed me to do as a director, is to do something and go deep on it. That's something that I'm looking forward into the reawakening of the theatrical world. I hope that there is time and resources to go as deep. I'll hope. I will only want to work on projects where there's time and resources to go as deep as is needed to go to really examine these stories, and not, oh, there's lots of words, we have to get the words out, right? So that's where I'll start, or that's what I'll say for now.
That was amazing. I just saw a comment come through saying that Kate, who was a participant, got chills just hearing the Tempest idea, and I did as well. I mean, that really hit me somewhere. So, I mean, please find a way to produce that. Thank you. And Makha?
I'm not sure. I think Amy Marie said it all. I'm like, I don't think I can articulate that at all, sincerely. Just like, truly, it has to be acknowledged, and it's gonna be challenging, but it has to happen, and mistakes will take place, but there's no moving forward without trudging through it first. And also, please, Amy Marie, I'd love to audition for this project.
Yes. Oh, as would I. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for that. So I'm going to open up the floor for any questions. You can either, I guess it would be easier to maybe pop on if you have a question, or put it in the chat, whichever way. But we have about 4 minutes that we can answer some questions. So are there any questions?
You can put a question in the chat or use the raise hand function. Or any thoughts or questions? Any responses to what you've heard our beautiful artists speaking about tonight?
I think you all left them all speechless. I mean, it was such powerful things that you all said. So on behalf of oh, wait 1 second. Oh, just a big thank you. You're doing the work. Yes, Mary, they are. And thank you so much for doing the work. And so on behalf of the Discovering Hamlet project, I want to thank you all for your time and your thoughts and your work. It's blood, sweat, and tears. It's essence. Thank you for your essence. Anytime art is a piece of us, we give a piece of ourselves every time. And so I want to thank you all so much for giving of your time and the giving of yourselves to this project. And I believe that it has the ability to change the world. I'm so glad that we're doing it together. And so I turn it back over to Lesley Currier.
Jourdan, thank you so much. You were an amazing leader for this project. The artists who you assembled were just incredible, as I think people could see from the little clip. I just want to remind people these materials are free to use. Just email us, and if you know any teachers who might want to use this in their classrooms, we made all the videos in short chunks so that they could be shown during a class period. And our artists are available to come live by Zoom into your classrooms as well. So thank you everybody for being here tonight. Thank you to our panelists and Marcia for all of your work behind the scenes, and Jourdan for your leadership. And thank you to everybody who cares about Shakespeare. There's so much there, and as somebody who's had the privilege of being able to engage with Shakespeare in a number of different settings, with children, with professional actors, in prisons, with system impacted youth, I have seen how there is something in Shakespeare that can resonate with just about everybody, and something in Shakespeare that lifts us all up. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. So I believe that Shakespeare can continue to be relevant and useful, and that the stories, particularly the way our modern day storytellers interpret them, will remain beloved by many for a long time to come. Thanks for being here tonight, everybody. We'll see you all soon.